Hello, everyone. A warm welcome back to this community of practice space. We've all gathered here to learn about teacher education reform, practices, good ideas, strategies, challenges in Sub-Saharan Africa. And you might know me well by now, hopefully. My name is Marianne, and I've been part of the session since July 31st when we first began. And today marks the fourth session, the fourth gathering of our community. So we hope that today serves to be an engaging session like the other ones we've had so far. This is not a webinar series. This is a community of practice where all of you are experts and practitioners coming together to share what you know and to learn from each other about teacher education, especially pre-service right now, reform practices in Sub-Saharan Africa. And we'll do in-service next year. We are planning on having this space for at least a year. Right now, this iteration goes until early December, and then we'll meet again next year for in-service and CPD strategies and gaps. I want to give a quick thank you to the partners that are helping to join in this space. This community of practice is being organized by UNESCO ICPA, and we have our director, Dr. Quentin Woden, on the call with us today. He'll be sharing a bit later. And we're also partnering with the European Union's Regional Teachers Initiative for Africa, that's the EURTIA, and the Global Partnership for Education's Knowledge and Innovation Exchange Hub, that's the GPE KICS Hub for 19 countries in Eastern, Western, and Southern Africa. And the KICS Hub is a joint endeavor with the IDRC, which is the International Development and Research Center of Canada, and of course the GPE. And we also have contributions from the Shanghai Funds and Trust, Africa Federation of Teaching Regulatory Authorities, that's AFTRA, and the African Union. So it's a collaborative space. And I think that all of you are joining from many different spaces. Some of you are coming from ministries, many of you are. Some of you are coming from NGOs, from UNESCO or UNICEF offices. Some of you are coming from KICS-funded projects. And quite a few of you are coming from schools and teacher training institutes. So it's a dynamic space. We're learning together. We realize in this space that knowledge is a co-creation. Nobody has all the answers. Nobody has all the evidence. Nobody has all the good ideas. So this space is, again, not a webinar. It's a space for you to actively come and share what you know and to learn from others in an ongoing way, building towards assignments and tasks that you'll do along the way to share what you're learning. I think that's all from me, Dr. Maina. So I want to say Dr. Maina Gyalko is our learning facilitator. He's wonderful, and he's been taking us through all the learning activities, and he'll be taking over now to guide us through today's session. So over to you, Dr. Maina. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marianne, and welcome to this space today. Today, we are going to recap the 2 weeks. We had amazing work, assessments, and thank you very much for your inputs, which you did in the Google Classroom, a lot of submission, a lot of discussion. And then today we have speakers who are going to spotlight innovations all the way from Nigeria, Kenya, and Tanzania. And then after that, we are going to interrogate the innovation through our discussion forum and breakout rooms. And then we are going to have ICBA checklist on teacher pre-service education, which is going to be shared with all of us. And then we are going to react to it before we do our closing remarks on that. And we have our takeaway, which we're going to take 2 weeks to work on it through our Google Classroom. So welcome. And this is a space whereby we have been, as we have been told, we are open, we are sharing. It's a co-creation space whereby we are coming here to react, to reflect on what is being shared and connect with what we have in our own countries. So it's a moment of being open-minded, being pluralistic, and listening and also sharing. Make sure that when you are requested to share in the chat, share your questions, share your remarks. And when you're not speaking, please make sure your microphone is muted. And when you are given an opportunity to speak, just be brief so that we can have many people connecting with us. Welcome, and let us learn together. So to begin with, I'd like us to share one word, what gap stuck from the last session. Because in the last session, we are unpacking gaps, the gaps we have in our teacher education programs. So in chat, can we quickly share something which you got, either you got from the activities we did last time or from the homework which you do? So please share in the chat something which stuck with you last session. Just share in chat something which stuck with you, a gap. Thank you very much, Derek, for that. Thank you very much, Duncourt. Thank you very much, Belinda. Thank you very much, Lopez, for that. Sempefo, thank you. Thank you very much, Hillary. Thank you very much, Mavimbela. Thank you very much, Derek. Thank you very much, Mirjam, Elmouth. Thank you very much. So you can see the diversity of the gaps which stuck with each of us. So it shows how diverse and how different that we are having different challenges across board. And today we'll have an opportunity to listen to the area of in the quiz, in the article, and all that which we did. We had 10 questions in the quiz, and that is the kind of engagement that we got, accuracy rate and completion rate. At least people are able to complete the sessions in terms of the quiz. So what we are going to do now is to reflect on what we did last time. And in the reflection, we are going to be divided into 10 groups. So when it comes to your computer and you are requested to join a group, please join a group so that we don't have people remaining in the room. So in the last 2 weeks, we have been able to draft reflections on teacher preparation gaps. And we also had an opportunity to look at possible solutions in your context. So today we are using these breakout rooms for us to share within our peers. And this is not about repeating the whole essay, which you have already submitted, but it's about summarizing what you learned and what you're also going to learn from each other. So when you get to the room, highlight one gap, say why it matters in your context, and propose one actionable act that you have done. So we are going to have 10 rooms, 6 minutes. Then after 6 minutes, we are going to come back here and share. So it's only 6 minutes. The time now is 12 past. So 18 past, I'm going to close the room. I'm opening the rooms now. Please click join room. You will be with your colleagues there. Unmute your mic. Share a gap, why it matters, and one actionable idea. And then we are going to come back in this room. Enjoy as you share with your colleagues. So make sure when you see a prompt asking you to go to a room, go to the room and then unmute and share with your colleague in that room.
Anybody want to?
Hello?
Oh, sorry. I did not realize I was assigned here. I'm not sure.
Just click join.
Entering.
Yes.
Me to join. Welcome back. I hope everybody is coming back from the session. I hope you had a good discussion. You can see people are still coming back. We have 21. Let's wait for the others. In a few seconds, everybody will be here. The rooms are closed and everybody is back here. So welcome back. I hope you had a discussion. Some rooms people are not speaking. So maybe something we need to see how best to work on it. So thank you very much for
that particular session. So what I want us to share now, I want to share one thing that you have learned from listening to your colleagues in the other room. So just put one crucial thing, just go to the chat and share one crucial thing that you have learned from the other rooms. And I will request you to raise up your hand so that we can have some few people talking. So I'm looking at hands. One thing that you learned, not what you contributed, but something you learned from your colleagues when you are presenting or you are sharing in the room. Share in the chat. I'm looking at the chat, but I'm also looking at hands because I want some few people to speak. Yes, Oyugoga Onu, can you unmute and speak? Oyugoga Onu?
All right, thank you, sir. From in our group, I learned about the Ethiopia's challenge, the gap that exists in pre-service teaching, teacher education, and that was the lack of coherence in implementation of the curriculum for training pre-service teachers. The curriculum is well designed, well prepared, but the problem comes in the implementation because the implementation is quite ineffective. And what my colleague, our participant said from one of the universities was that they are collaborating with the Federal Ministry of Education to prepare a guideline that will help build capacity of institutions to implement those curricula that have been designed so that each level of implementation will understand their roles that they need to play and how to play them, and so fill that gap of ineffective implementation.
Thank you
sir.
very much, Oyugoga, for that. And thank you very much for the people who are typing. Please make sure you type your lesson learned. Derek Dennis, can you share, unmute and share, Derek Dennis?
Yes, thank you, Prof. Even though my colleague was still in speech when the breakout section expired, but what I pick up from the conversation, she mentioned teacher support system. And I think from Namibia or so, as she said, it's something that is lacking. It's a major gap in their own system. But one thing she mentioned is that her proposal is that from national level to institutional level, there should be a kind of a policy that will target this issue of teacher support system. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Derek Dennis. And please, can you read the chats? There are very nice contribution coming. One last person, Lopez Nazare. Ropel Nazare.
Yes, good afternoon, colleagues. There's one thing that I learned from the group where I was in. It's very fascinating that it's one of the issues that was pinpointed in last week's session, that, you know, if you have well-trained teachers, then the rest will be easy to solve. Colleagues in my group have discussed the challenges that different countries are facing in terms of having non-qualified teacher trainers to respond to a variety of issues that children face, and this end up impacting the quality of teaching and learning. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your contribution. And today we are looking at how do you bridge those gaps? Because we have recognized the gaps, but you can't just recognize the gap and sit there. You need to take actions. And taking actions, you need to use evidence-based actions. And therefore today, we'll be exploring innovations from countries that are using systematically to close those gaps. So I want you to think about the innovation as a bridge, which is transforming the recognition of the gap into practical solutions, accountability, and continuous improvement. That is what we are aiming for today. So today, we will be exploring inclusive approaches in pre-service teacher education and their role in teaching quality. We'll also be looking at how to apply thinking principles to make teacher education more responsive and inclusive. And we're going to draw lessons from Nigeria, Kenya, Tanzania to inform reforms into our own context. And then we're going to have an opportunity to analyze and adapt these inclusive strategies through our breakout discussion to see how can they work in our respective areas. And then we'll have an opportunity to listen to a framework which will be presented, and we'll engage with it. Unfortunately, later we'll also use it in terms of assessing the issues we have. And all this is to build our way of valuing inclusivity, innovation, and equity as core principles in preparing teachers for diverse learners. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome our first presenter, who is Adeyemi Razak Badmus, Director of TTI's National Commission for Colleges of Education, Nigeria. He's going to take us through the status of Nigeria teacher education curriculum reform process. And as he speaks, please note your question, and you can type your questions in the chat, so that at the end of the presentation, he's going to respond, 3 minutes to respond to the questions. Let's welcome Adebayo with a round of applause. Welcome, Adebayo.
Thank you very much, the moderator. I so much appreciate my coming here. Thank you for all the effort. The program is so impactful. Not wasting too much of our time, National Commission for Colleges of Education is the agency of the Federal Ministry of Education saddled with the responsibility of pre-service teacher training in Nigeria. And one of its cardinal responsibilities is the development and review of teacher tertiary institutions' curriculum. Here we refer to it as NCE minimum standards. I want to speak to the presentation because of challenge of time. What makes this gathering a much more important to Nigeria is that it's timely, because presently we are neck deep in the review of the NCE minimum standards. This is why this conversation is timely for us here in Nigeria. In partnership with the development partners, with UNESCO, UNICEF, British Council, UBEC, Sidani Group, and CSMIM, we have tried, UNESCO has partnered with the NCCE to embark on the baseline assessment of our curricula with a view to identifying the challenges, the gaps. And that is exactly what you see on the slides provided. Among those gaps include the mismatch and non-alignment of the NCE curricula with the global standards, such as the 2063 Agenda and Education on Education and SDG 4. That is one of the gaps we identified through the baseline assessment conducted together with UNESCO. Again, in that realm is the weak. So non-integration of ICT into the minimum standards, that again is trying to impact negatively. We have non-alignment of curricula with the NERDC National Curriculum for the Basic Education. It may interest you to know that the National Commission for Colleges of Education is producing teachers for the basic education level. To that extent, it is expected that the curricula that are used at that level as a kind of an alignment with the curriculum used at the NCCE, I think, in our colleges of education. Also in that term figures poor ECCE curriculum. So that again is one of them. We have wide gap on facilities that are inclusive, safe, effective, and responsive to gender and disability needs. So you can see some of these gaps on the, on the slides. So conscious of these gaps, the federal government have been trying to embark on strategies of mitigating these challenges. And the first one I have here is the ICT capacity building. One interesting thing today, especially with the administration we have, the ministry is financially committed to raise teacher educators, the consciousness, the awareness, and instruction on that digital gap. Because you will agree with me that you speak to people the language they understand. The youth we have today, they are versed with ICT. To that extent, we think that the NCCE, through the Federal Ministry of Education, through the NCCE, is trying to leverage on the ICT component to enrich teaching and learning in our colleges of education. Equally, we have the cooperation, the collaboration with the British Council has resulted into having some courses which are planned to be streamlined into the present curricula we are trying to produce. So that again, when you look at the details, they've come under the approaches and strategies the government is taking to strengthen the pre-service teacher. So we have a stimulating teacher resourcefulness in digital education. These resources, these courses were run throughout the country. We have 6 geopolitical zones. Teacher trainers were put on ground. And as I speak to you now, the teacher trainers produced are now trying to cascade the same training in their respective colleges and also extending the same to their other colleagues. Then again, we have what we call STEP, strengthening English proficiency. That is part of effort to enhance. Yes, thank you very much. You can see it. Given the critical role which language and communication play in effective teaching and learning, STEP course was designed to equip teacher educators with relevant language and communication skills needed for effective delivery of instruction in English, thereby addressing challenges of comprehension and fluency among student teachers, as well as enhancing their learning outcomes. And you can see this, the second one. So the point we are saying, with the approval of the Federal Ministry of Education, especially the 2 ministers that are so passionate in upturning the challenges we have in our teacher training colleges now, we hope that by the time we come out with a new minimum standards, all of the challenges we have now will be something of the past. I think apart from that, we have institution development partners like Sidani. Sidani too is a development partner. The proposal, we have a proposal with them which we have started, which has yielded the fruit for us, and that is closing the gap of teacher educators in terms of a pedagogical strengths. So we have done that. That too, the government has seen the relevance in it, approved of it, have trainings in all the geopolitical zones, and presently too, that we are trying to cascade into all other states. I think, like you can see in the on the projected this thing. So we can see it. So if there are other questions, I think I will see the opportunity to address those questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Adebayo. Thank you very much for that great presentation about STEP and STRIDE and how you are partnering with Sudan to be able to address the challenges which you have said have risen. So I'd just like you to look at the chart to see the question. One of the questions they're asking is, what is the 4-in-1 model? Just briefly explain the 4-in-1 model as we look at other questions, please.
Okay, like what the 4-in-1 model, pedagogical model is saying is that in a classroom environment, there you cannot have an approach that answers all the questions. That a teacher education or a teacher in general should have a multifarious, multidimensional pedagogical skills such that it will be an inclusive one. It will be an answer to all the needs of the students in the classroom. So that is, in short, what the the 4-in-1. So with a single, with the knowledge of 4-in-1 approach, a teacher is able to answer all the needs of his multifarious types of students in his class. And that is, we think, is inclusive.
Thank you very much for that. We are still looking for any other question in the chat. There is another question here, which is talking about what is the rationale for STEP model and what point is it in the initial teacher education?
Please come again.
In the chat, somebody is asking, what is the rationale of the STEP model and at what point is the initial teacher education, where is it introduced?
Thank you very much. Like I did say, language and communication is critical to the quality of teaching and learning in a classroom. Together with British Council, the NCCE realized that some of our teacher educators, in terms of communication, in terms of language, there is a gap. So STEP and STRIDE are now brought up. They have a module, and the content of those modules are now streamlined into the curriculum of teacher educators at the teacher training level, such that the teachers we produce in colleges of education that are destined to go to the basic education level to teach, they will have that. And at the end of the day, it will enrich the quality of their communication. It will enrich the quality of their digital performance in colleges. And at the end of the day, learners' attainment will improve.
Thank you very much for that. Ujam Clarice, your hand is up. You can quickly react. Ujam Clarice.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Dr. Clarice Ujam. I'm from Federal Ministry of Education. I commend Mr. Badmos for the wonderful presentation. And I also want to add that some of the innovative initiatives that the Federal Ministry of Education in Nigeria had come up with is to ensure that the NCE, that TTI curricula that is being reviewed and updated is research-based. So we engage with all the researchers that were funded by IDRC, UNESCO, KISS Hub, African 19. We engaged all the researchers, even the nationally funded researchers, to come up with whatever findings and recommendations they think will be very, very important and could align with the new innovations that we want to introduce. So I just want to chip that in, that we have engaged and we are still engaging with researchers to make sure that the new curriculum, the updated curriculum, is actually research-based and then included in the curriculum for effective delivery and effective production of the teachers in the TTIs. This is just what I want to add to what Mr. Razak said. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your response. And please, you can go to the chat and respond to other questions, because on the time we are not going to have all the questions answered on air. So if you can respond, there are some 3 more questions which have not been answered. Just go there in chat and reply to that as we welcome the next person. Let's have a round of applause for the presenters who have just presented. Thank you very much for giving us the insight of Nigeria. And in their presentation, they mention Sudan Group. And therefore, we have a chance of inviting Sudan Group, where we have Dr. Hilary Okagbe, Senior Research Scholar, who is going to tell us about the pre-service teacher training, defining the impact of inclusive approaches to enhance teacher quality in Nigeria. Welcome, Dr. Hilary.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. As said, my name is Dr. Hilary Okabwe, Senior Research Scholar from the Sudani Group. So I'm here to present the pre-service teacher training, defining the impact of inclusive approaches to enhance teacher quality in Nigeria. Next slide. Okay, next slide. So this research is this research project is sponsored by the KISS GPE and IDRC, and is being implemented by the Sudani Group, NCC, and SIBA Consultancy Limited, Nigeria. Next slide, please. So next slide. So the background here, the research comes as a thorough literature search and the review of government documents, policies, and with a clear gap in literature that pre-service teachers training, especially the aspect of pedagogy, needs. There are serious gaps there, which this, according to IDRC specification, that we need to propose models that can help us solve the problem. So we propose what we call 4-in-1 model. The 4-in-1 model is a combination of teacher or tutor-centered and then learner or student-centered pedagogy. That is a combination of the micro-teaching, problem-based learning, TPAC, that is for technology, and then GSO method. So here we have to, I'm here to present the preliminary findings and then recommendation. Next slide, please. Yes, I've said it. These are the objective. We generate evidence because IDRC, they are very much interested on evidence we are to generate that we inform what the NCC is currently doing in curriculum review. Then we engage key stakeholders. Here, our key stakeholder in Nigeria is NCCE. Then we strengthened pre-service teachers' capacity using the 4-in-1 model. And then based on the IDRC specification, we ensure equal participation, and there is no marginalization for those that are underserved, like those with disability, those living in rural areas, and the rest. Next slide, please. Yeah, so these are the research questions that comes as a result of the objective. So we have to go to the field to get data to answer these research questions. Next slide, please. Yeah, the null hypothesis, and what we have in this hypothesis is to make sure that when we get the data, we build the capacity of the students, that is from baseline and then the end line, that there will be a significant shift in knowledge. So you will see the results later. Next slide, please. Next slide. So before we do that, next slide, we did something like a needs assessment, next slide, to have a key informant interviews with these policy makers to know actually, apart from what we saw in the literature, we moved to the field to assess the stakeholders. So these are the approach. But the first thing we did is to ask like needs assessment, do they need these models? And these are where it was later implemented. We are looking at, because Nigeria is divided into 6 major geopolitical zones. So we selected 6 colleges of education, those that are the normal ones that run normal programs. Then we purposefully chose the Federal College of Education, Oyo, which is the only school in West Africa that is dedicated to training pre-service teachers for special people with disabilities, and then the rest. Then we now chose some colleges of education that are specific, that their mandate is on technology education. Next slide. So we conducted the key informant interview, as I was saying before, it's like the needs assessment. This intervention, do they need it? So we interviewed policymakers in NCCE, we interviewed those provosts of colleges of education, the 6 colleges of education that you've seen in the previous slide, and then the results are presented. The next slide. Yeah, this is just the method of the KII, the study location, NCCE, and those of the 6 colleges of education, and then their academics, the provost, deputy provost, and the rest. So the project follows a 2-level quasi-experimental design. So the first level is to build the capacity of the pre-service teachers, while the second level is a subset of those pre-service teachers to go to primary schools in Nigeria, some selected primary school, and then teach the pupils using the knowledge they get from our intervention. Next slide. Then these are the findings. The preliminary here, because the result of only 3 out of the 6 colleges of education have been analyzed. So the gaps we identified through the KII, there is a curriculum gap, there is a knowledge deficit in pedagogy application, there is low technology. So what we are looking for just captured pedagogy, curriculum gaps, and then low technological fluency. So the summary of this slide now is that the teachers themselves, the teachers, not the students, the lecturers themselves, appear to also need those skills, those 4-in-1 model, which is an evidence for scale up. So the quantitative, because what we did here, we proposed 3 hypotheses here when after the in the intervention. So because of equity in research, what we did, and to reduce attrition in the control group, so we taught the control group gender responsive pedagogy, which does not have anything to do with our 4-in-1 model. So, and that created a sort of equity and interest. So now, although the IDRC is interested in our 4-in-1 model, in addition, we also have evidence that including gender responsive pedagogy in the curriculum, we also help the students in the future. So these are the 3 out of the 6 colleges of education. So at baseline, that H1 you see now is at baseline, there is no result, there is no change in the hypothesis that their knowledge are buried the same. The last column there now, the 4th column now show that in all the 4 models, there are significant change after the intervention. That is the pre-test and the post-test for the GSAW, PBL, and TPAC. For subjective, because we don't want to use only objective method, we also use subjective, so that to place the 2 side by side. The first one is subjective, and then the second one is objective. So next slide. So to explain this result, very well. You will see that, next slide, to look at the interpretations. Yes, so this is the summary. Overall, both the subjective and then objective method show that our intervention, there is a significant change in knowledge, shift in knowledge for those in the intervention group, especially for the learner-centered, which are the Jigsaw and the problem-based learning. Why the teacher-centered or the tutor-centered micro-teaching and then the TPAC has less significant results. So overall, the evidence suggests that the 4-in-1 model intervention help to improvement. So we've now found the evidence why these methods could be included in the Nigerian NC's College of Education curriculum. Next slide. So these are the challenges, the lessons learned, and the policy implementation. The challenges during the implementation, which are mostly systemic, like infrastructure issues, a lot of learning, and involvement of policymakers was key, was number one thing that helped us. The NCCE gave us more than 100% support. It is like a co-implementation. They are involved in all the process till now. Yeah, so that is the challenge. There is no little, these are just learnings from the implementation. Next slide, please.
So sorry, Dr. Hillary, could you please try to wrap up? The time is gone, but just take a few, maybe one more minute if you can. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, this is the last part. Yeah, that's the lessons learned. We learned that, in summary, there should be a shift from teacher-centered learning and then to student or learner-centered. Then secondly, we have evidence that the teachers, that is the teachers of the pre-service teachers, also need this 4-in-1 model. And then thirdly, we have also, I think for the first time, trained students, build their capacity on how to include gender, equality, inclusion, and disability trainings into their classroom management, grading, and every activities once they leave they finish their studies as a student. Thank you, and over. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that presentation. We are very glad. I hope people are writing questions in the chat. Thank you for telling us more about the 4-in-1 models and how you did it across 6 colleges, where you looked at the baseline assessment. And thank you for sharing the 3 levels of your intervention, where you identify gaps in curriculum, gaps in knowledge deficit, as well as low technological integration. And it is interesting that you found the lecturers also need this type of skills. And also you did a training for the group where you gave them GRP. And after the observation, you have reported that there was notable improvement from that. From the intervention, you say there was a significant gains, particularly on learner-centered approaches, as well as problem-based learning, and some improvement in TPAC. You have also highlighted challenges such as system barriers and limited involvement for policymakers, but you said they were very supportive. And lessons learned has shown that strategic engagement in policymakers has made it to be aligned. So we would like you now to respond to the questions which have been given here in the chat. I'm just looking at the chat. Just look at the chat and respond to 2 or 3 questions before we welcome the next speaker. We have some questions in the chat.
Okay.
There is one question here which is saying, what was the attrition rate of these teachers prepared under the 4-in-1 model? What was the attrition rate?
Okay, the attrition rate, although this is preliminary studied, more data are coming, but we planned in addition to reduce attrition rate by engaging the the management of the schools, especially the provosts. And then also we told them in advance that they will have certificates. So they were so happy. Most of them, we have high level of attendance because most of them need that certificate. And once they are done, so the use of the certificate and then the stakeholder engagement help us to reduce the attrition.
Thank you very much for that. There are more questions in the chat. I wish, and there are also questions from the first group. Please try to answer the questions in the chat so that everybody can get a response. One more question before I go from you. There's a question asking, how do you measure progress consideration in the 4-in-1 model?
Yes, the progress there is before implementing, you design your study tools, like a questionnaire that you first of all, you take the pre-test. That is after the engagement, they will now take the post-test. Then you can now use statistical method to check if there is progress. Like this time around, we did, instead of the normal comparing the control and intervention, we go a step further. So are there knowledge gain from baseline to end line? Then further presentation is going to show, we are going to first of all, further disaggregate based on gender. Want to know, oh, this intervention, is it more of the females across the 4 model? Are they the one that have more knowledge shift than the male? And then other intersectionality variables.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that presentation. Please continue looking at the chat. And if you see any questions related to your presentation, please do present. Well, let's give him a round of applause as we welcome the other presenters. So we are now coming from West Africa across Nigeria, dropping down across the equator, and we are coming into Tanzania. From Tanzania, we have Dr. Wachira Nicholas, Assistant Professor and Associate Dean and Head of Programs at Aga Khan University Institute of Education Development. He's going to talk about delivering responsive and inclusive initial teacher education through design thinking in 2 East African countries, that is in Kenya and Tanzania. Let's welcome Dr. Wachira for this presentation. Welcome, Prof.
Thank you, Dr. Gyoko. Let me begin by, saying 2 things. One is that this study is being implemented by Aga Khan Foundation, Aga Khan University, and Cambridge University. Number 2, let me say that we are at the very initial stages of this very exciting study. So, and our study, like has been said, is about responsive and education through human-centered design. I also want to state that we interchangeably, so do not be surprised if. Okay. Somebody please move me to the next slide.
I've moved the next slide, that one.
Oh, somehow it is not showing on mine, but that's fine. This study is structured around 4 major questions, and those are questions to do with how might we be able to integrate human-centered design to become part of the pedagogical approach of teachers. And number 2 was to build the tutor's capacity to deliver inclusive and equity-focused lessons. And number 3 was how might all of this affect student experience? And finally, we wanted to look at how might this reflect or add to the current teacher education policies in both Kenya and Tanzania. Next slide, please. So in this particular project, I looked for a way of how best can I put it together. So the basis of it really is we are building on the teacher education framework that exists in both the countries, CBC pedagogical reforms that are being adopted in the countries, and of course, the global commitments, for example, to SDG 4. And we have got 4 major things that we are seeking to build interventions on. And that includes HCD integration, inclusion, and social equity. Next slide, please. Now, I must begin by saying that the basis of this particular study is Schools 2030 model. Schools 2030 has managed to introduce what we are calling design thinking or human-centered design across more than 100 schools across developing countries. The target being, how can we make teachers become innovators or people who can actually be able to tackle the problems that exist, in the belief that a lot of the educational problems that we are having to deal with are actually contextual, and therefore teachers are strategically placed to be able to solve many of those challenges rather than wait. And therefore, they adopted the design thinking approach. There are about 8 steps. Because of time, I'm not going to go through all of them. But the gist of it is that you first identify a problem, a challenge that a teacher is having in their class, be it reading, be it, some mathematical problem, or it could be a socially related problem like, girl-child pregnancy. And then you explore and find out what is really causing this problem. And once you get to the root cause and understand what the problem is, you then come up with a solution that will help alleviate that particular problem. And once you do that, you create something to solve that, whether it is a policy, whether it is a teaching resource. So you make that solution into something that is usable to alleviate that particular challenge, and then test it out. And once you test it out, if you find there are any other challenges, you do what we call iteration. You go back and start again and try it again until you really get to the exact solution. So this is moving teachers from just passive actors delivering a curriculum to people who can actually deconstruct the curriculum and try and figure out how best can we deal with many of these challenges. Next slide, please. So having said that, this study is structured around what we call an action research methodology, whereby we start with the reconnaissance, where we studied what are the challenges that were, what was the current situation in the teacher training colleges before we brought our intervention of, what we call design workshops. And and I'll share with you a little bit. And we have got colleges in both Kenya and Tanzania. Then after that, we came up with what we call design workshops. This was to support teachers in getting them to know what design thinking is, to know how to apply it, to adapt it such that it brings about a practice, a pedagogy that is much more inclusive and that brings about more social equity. And through this, we did not just tell them, but it was a co-creation process between the researchers and the tutors who were at the teacher training college. After that, we challenged the teachers to now begin prototyping cycles. That is, after they have identified a challenge, how might they come up with a solution? So building solutions for that. And then that is actually where we have reached. Whatever findings we get, we shall then try to inform policy at the end of it. Next slide, please. And so our first activity in this research was to look at the policies in teacher education that affect the teacher training colleges. And what we found, if you look at this, is that when we look at, design kind of thinking, which brings about innovation, inclusive education, and social equity, we found while there were very many policies, you can see there is only one green, which comes under TSC policies, that really sought to cover continuous professional development for teachers. But many of the other policies were either silent or very partially talking to issues of the kind of innovative teaching that we want with the design thinking, inclusion, and social equity. That meant for us that there was a gap that this study could fill. Next slide, please. So what did we find? We engaged in a number of methodologies. We had surveys, we had focus group discussions, we had interviews, and we observed the tutors. And this is at the reconnaissance stage before the intervention. And what we found there was interesting, that while the tutors scored themselves very fairly, you can see 3.5, 3.9 out of 4, in terms of we are innovators, we do inclusion, etc. Our qualitative part of it, the focus group discussions, etc., actually told us there was very little of that was happening. So those two methods were showing us very different lessons. And so we found that actually there was a difference between tutors' self-ratings and reality. Next slide, please. We also had a look at what were the tutors' views about teaching, and did these views align when we broke down inclusion, HCD or design thinking, and self-equity? Did they align with this? And you can see from the results there that these students, and they were new, they actually had very positive views about the kinds of things that we were proposing to the college through this particular study. And therefore, in our own reflection, we thought, hey, this is an opportunity for us to support these students to start seeing and experiencing the teaching profession as of high reality or professionalism as it should, where innovation takes place, there's professional responsibility, autonomy, etc. So we thought this would really improve their quality. Next slide, please. Yes, and so we did about 5 days, 5 days of, actually 6 days of HCD intervention. And after that, we observed teachers. And what did we begin to find? We began to see that the teachers were now beginning to be more inclusive. And because in the design thinking process, there is a stage of empathizing where you put yourself in the shoes of the student. Tutors were beginning to do that, and therefore they were becoming more inclusive because they were identifying needs and interests of students and trying to make them part. And I'll leave you to read the quotes at the bottom there because of time. We also found that the HCD was beginning to get formalized into lesson planning, into schemes of work for planning in their learning areas, and it became something that now was beginning to become a formal way of doing things. Also, we found that HCD tools and mindsets, such as, being empathetic, the whole issue of iteration. After you get a problem, you can't solve it, you try it again. And, reflection being part of their teaching. We also found tutors were beginning to co-create with students. When they planned, they would ask students, how might you want, what kind of instruction would you want? What do you think we should start with, etc., giving them more autonomy. Tutor readiness, we also found that tutors were now beginning, instead of externalizing challenges and saying the administration should solve it, they were now beginning to take charge. And also collaboration began to be seen across departments. Next slide, please. Yes, so what are we seeing? We saw emerging tutor mindsets in the initial stage where they wanted quick fixes or admin solves it, to transition where I can take the risk, though with some hesitation. But then there were others who moved up to the new mindset where they were beginning to actually tell themselves, I can solve some of the challenges that I have in my class. And they even said, I wish we had seen this before. Next slide, please.
Dr. Wachir,
So the
if you can wrap up,
challenges.
please. This is your last slide.
This is my last slide.
Thank you.
My last slide. So hesitant tutors. So you don't always get 100%. There are always those who, are skeptical about it. Externalizing challenges. 65% of them felt that issues of resource and admin barriers, and rather than take agency, they preferred the administration taking that up. And then we also had weak areas where some tutors were struggling with analysis of problem framing, of especially in the area of inclusion. And so we found inclusion is an area we need to really work on in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ashira, for the presentation. And ladies and gentlemen, we had it all about the human-centered design following 8 steps and issues of trying, empathy, testing, and iterating. And the outcomes, we are very clear that teachers were empowered and they were able to overcome the challenge. We heard about the action research approach, which they use in the design, and focusing on the inclusion and equity. There was also issue of the policy context, whereby going across, they only found CPD under Teacher Service Commission, but others were not explicitly shown. So from the finding, from the qualitative evidence, we have seen that there are change. We saw positive feedback on the proposal. After doing the 6-day HCD, there have been inclusive practices by the tutor. They have a formalized HCD training, integration of HCD tools and mindset, co-creation between tutors and students, and tutors taking ownership on the learning process, as well as strengthening collaboration across department. Thank you very much, Dr. Ashira. Let's look at the chart so that you can quickly respond to 2-3 questions before we move on. So there is a question here, and that's about a bit of understanding. Could you please explain the meaning of human-centered design as well as CBC pedagogy? Maybe briefly you can give a highlight of CBC and HCD.
Okay, thank you. HCD stands for human-centered design, whereby you put your, I don't want to use the word client, the student whom you're dealing with at the center of everything that you're doing. And therefore, all the teaching that you have must focus on the needs and interests of that student. I think, and that is why I talked about empathizing. In terms of CBC, this is competency-based curriculum, whereby it stands for the shift that governments in East Africa are trying to make from focusing only on content to focusing on competencies, that is skills. What can the learner do? I think that's brief enough.
Thank you very much, Doc. There's a question where they are wondering if the teachers were supposed to identify the problem themselves. What was the level of reluctance? Because you talked about readiness at the end. Were they reluctant at the initial stages of identifying a problem?
Absolutely. The culture that we have had in East Africa has been government solves it, the principal solves it. And so they are not used to, exploring the challenges they have and looking for solutions. They are used to somebody else from outside. So yes, there was some hesitancy, and I must admit we had to work really hard to get them to see that this is also their responsibility as teachers. And that is why at the end I said, majority of them actually started picking it up after some time, but there were still those who still felt, no, this is somebody else's problem, not mine. So I must admit that.
Thank you very much. Final question, and you'll answer others in the chat. They are talking about sustainability. The fact that there was a mindset shift, which is very positive. Do you think it will be sustained over time from your observation?
My belief is yes, because one of the strategies that we have done is in each of the institutions, if you looked at the questions, one was a program level question, whereby we are now trying to change the structures and the policies at the institution to support the kinds of mindsets that we are talking about. For example, when you're planning a lesson, do you provide an opportunity for students to co-design? And so those structures, plus also we are having design champions whom we have trained within the colleges, who will continue with this work after 3 years of the program. So I believe that, and assuming many of the tutors will remain there, that should be enough to make it sustainable for some time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ashira. Let's give a round of applause for Dr. Ashira. Now, he is going to answer the questions you ask in the chat, if any, but we are now going to move to the next part. We have heard from the three presenters. I want us to pause in a moment. Coming all the way from Nigeria down to East Africa, how do these approaches connect with the teacher education gap we explored in the last session? In a moment, we are going to break into groups, and each group will take one of today's innovation. You will discuss and think of one and see how you can link it to your context. Imagine how it could be adapted. So when the breakout rooms are open, please, I'd like you to please click join, go to your room, unmute, and discuss. And we will be having a link. I'm going to share a link in the chat because I want you to start putting your ideas together. So I have made a slide template. So if you're in group 1, you will populate slide number 1. If it's not enough, you'll add another one. If you are group 2, you'll populate slide number 2. And when we come back, we'll present or we'll read through what you have done. So we are going to go back, and you have only 10 minutes to discuss this. We are constrained of time. Apologies for that. Please, when you go to the breakout room, please unmute and start speaking. When you see a prompt telling you join the room, please join a room. So I'm opening the room now. We have only 10 minutes. So at 27, I'm going to close all the room. I'm going to share the link to let me share the link just now so that we don't get lost in the chat, so that you can click the link, open where you are going to populate your discussions, and then when we come back, we'll be able to see what transpired in your room. So I've shared the link.
Dr. Mina?
Yes?
Sorry, Dr. Mina? Yes. Is it okay if I put the slides that were just presented into the chat box for people who want to review something so they can better answer those questions in case they didn't understand something? Okay,
Yes,
so
please.
everyone,
Yes.
please check the chat box. I'm sharing the slides as a file in the chat box in case you want to review something that you don't understand.
Anybody in the room?
In room, you are supposed to be in which room?
I was supposed to be in room 10. I don't know what happened. It just went off. Maybe you can invite me again.
Who is this?
This is Kimachui Maxwell.
Let me look at you, Kimachui Maxwell, and send you to room 10.
Can you check also me which room can I join? This is Dut Garang, Dut Kon.
Okay, let me do one by one. Dutkon, Kimachui, I have to go across everybody. Dutkon, you have not joined your room. You're supposed to be in room number 7.
So how do I join? Because I was a bit, I went, yeah, okay, let me join now, okay.
Okay, Kimachui who?
I was saying I don't know what happened.
Yeah, I'm looking
Daktari,
at your name. Which room are you, Kimachui, please?
room 10. I was trying to join room 10. You invited me to room 10.
I'm trying to look at your name again. Kimachui, I've seen you. Let me put you to 10 again.
Kindly.
Room 10 is, okay. I've moved you to another room.
Okay, room 9, eh?
Yes, yes.
Okay, then.
Sorry about that. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that engagement. I can see most people were able to share something, and we can see what our colleagues were doing from the session. Thank you very much from your presentation, because there was quite a good discussion from the teams. So quickly, I want 2 hands up so that we can share that experience. If you go through the presentation, which is showing, you can see what have been shared. So scroll through the presentation, and you can raise up your hand and tell us, what do you notice across countries? We have only 2 minutes for this before we move to the next thing. So you can raise up your hands and share with us. What did you, yes, Derek Dennis. If you scroll to those people who have typed, what do you see? Derek Dennis?
Yes. So from our group, what we discovered as a very good innovation, but is lacking, is the issue of impact, ACD, Human Center development. I don't know how you call it, ACD workshop intervention, impact on tutors teaching.
Derek, have we lost you?
Hello, are you hearing me?
Derek, are you there?
Yeah, Derek, we can hear you.
Yes, Derek, I can hear you.
All right, thank you. So we discussed HCD workshop intervention, impact on tutors teaching. And we see that this is a very good approach, but it's lacking because most times the issue about mentorship and coaching, they are not seen in our teacher training institute except through personal one-on-one engagement. So we say, I think this is something that we can discuss at our professional learning community level, encourage all lecturers, encourage leaders to think about something in this direction. Yes, thank you.
Dr. Mina, you're on mute.
Sorry, you can share your comments in the chat for the rest, because we need to move on. And for this session now, I would like to welcome our next speaker, who is our director. But before the speaker comes, you have looked at the innovation, and you can see that this innovation model, we were exposed to different models. So it gives us an opportunity to look at what is realistic to our context and what is applicable. And from this collective learning, it is clear that there is something we can learn from the people who presented, and there's something we can learn from across other countries, and there's something we can implement. So let's take this initiative and pick up this for replication, and we can reach out for the presenters to gather more information and in-depth through our Google Classroom. You can be sharing what you are thinking and how it's going, and that can be facilitated for further improvement. Ladies and gentlemen, we now welcome Dr. Quintin Wooden, the Director of UNESCO ICBA, who is going to present about UNESCO's ICBA checklist on teacher-preserved education. As he's presenting, please, you can share your questions, and we are going to have some time to indulge with what he has presented. Welcome, Dr. Quintin.
Thank you, Mina. Thank you to all the participants, and it's very nice to see that we have a good number of people, and you are staying. Almost 70 people still in the room. I'm going to try to introduce to you a bit of work we are doing at ICBA, International Institute for Capacity Building in Africa, on pre-service education, and how we hope to be able to build in coming weeks a simple diagnostics tool. And the hope is that you can provide a bit of feedback today in this meeting, but we'll also share a version of the tool relatively soon. And if you're interested, you might be also able to pilot the tool in your own country. So we can go to the next slide. The tool is related in many ways to the new continental educational strategy for Africa that was adopted by the African Union. This is a strategy for the next 10 years. I think you're aware of it. I'm not going to go in details into it, but teachers are really at the core of that new strategy. Teachers, of course, as you all are convinced, are the key to improve educational outcomes. Now, in the next slide, you will see that there is a stronger emphasis actually on teachers in CESA, and there's also a stronger emphasis on the need to make sure that students learn key skills. Now, if we think about the 3 objectives in CESA on teachers, one is very broad, improving teacher policies, education, and professional development, including pre-service education, of course. The other one is a bit more narrow, increasing the attractiveness of the teaching profession. And the third one is still a bit more narrow, investing in school leadership, including the share of female leaders. And I'll mention those 3 because you will see that they come in some way into the diagnostic tool that you are trying to create for pre-service education. I also want to emphasize the stronger emphasis on skills, especially foundational literacy and numeracy. That's what FLN means. So we need to expand cost-effective approaches to foundational learning, and then we also need to impart social-emotional skills and education for health and well-being, and finally anticipate labor market demands. And that relates, among others, to ICT and AI and STEM education. And in one way or the other, we also have to reflect those priorities into any diagnostics tool for pre-service education. So the next slide is about a tool that was created about 10 years ago, a bit longer actually, at the World Bank, and some of you may be aware of it. It's called SABER, S-A-B-E-R, and SABER meant at the time a systems approach for better education results. So the tool was not perfect like any tool. No tool is perfect, but it was really well designed to try to help countries think about what they could do to improve their education system. And so the tool had, the SABER program, let's call it that way, had a dozen different domains. And one of the domains was about teachers. And that domain had 8 strategic goals. And this is what this slide shows. It starts with setting clear expectations for teachers to attracting the best into the profession, preparing them with useful training and experience, matching them with student needs, etc., etc. I'm not going to go through the 8 of those. That's available on the website, and if you're interested, we can share the tool. It's not used anymore, but what was great about SABER is that it was based on evidence of what works, and it was a very simple way to do a first diagnostic of some of the issues that might be affecting education systems, any one of the dozen domains, or in this case, the teacher's domain. The tool, and that's the next slide, the tool was designed to have for each domain objectives, the 8 objectives that I mentioned for teachers before. And then for each of those objectives, you had then what was called levers, and then you had very specific questions to assess how well a country was doing in terms of policies related to those questions and levers. So as I mentioned, the first objective under the SABER domain for teachers was setting clear expectations for teachers. And there were 2 levers. Are there clear expectations? And then is there useful guidance on the use of teachers' working time so that they can actually meet those expectations? The second objective was attracting the best into teaching, and there were 4 levers. What are the entry requirements? I mean, what kind of degree do you need? Is teacher pay appealing for talented candidates? Are working conditions appealing? You all know that beyond pay, working conditions matter a lot for attracting good candidates and for keeping teachers as teachers when they're good. And there attractive career opportunities. And I think we have discussed some of this in this COP, et cetera. And so just on the right-hand side, you have mean scores. There was a way to rate how well countries were doing, and then countries were obtaining a rating from 1 to 4. So anything under 3 was actually low, and these were the main ratings for Sub-Saharan African countries for which the tool was applied. But so if I recap, the idea of Saber is that you had different domains. A domain, for example, was teachers. You had objectives. Under those policy objectives, you had levers, ways to achieve this objective, and then you had very specific questions that were asked to try to assess how countries were doing to meet those aspirations in the levers. That was the structure. So now I'm going to shift to what we are trying to do at IGBA. That's the next slide. So we are trying to, they didn't format very well in the translation into the common PowerPoint, but that's okay. So we want to create at IGBA an overall tool on teacher policies and frameworks. And then we hope to also create more detailed tools for various aspects, right? So we have a version of the overall tool. We have been piloting it in 3 countries so far. The criterion one is whether teacher policies and frameworks are framed within the guidance of international documents, including the documents of the African Union. The second criterion is a series of questions about the legal standing of the teaching profession. The third criterion is pre-service education. And there you have a few examples of questions which are in the overall tool. That includes what is the minimum teaching qualification for entry, right? Does it correspond to the African Union teacher qualification framework? So African Teacher Quality Framework is that ATQF there. Are teachers registered and licensed to teach? Do teachers pass professional tests, et cetera, et cetera? So you have a number of questions, even in the overall scorecard on teacher policies and frameworks, what I call level 1, that relate to pre-service education, but you have many, many other things. And it continues with criterion 4, which is teacher continuous professional development, so in-service training. And the last one, criterion 5, is about teacher working conditions, right? So that's, if you will, the equivalent of a macro Saber, if I want to take the analogy of the World Bank. It's a broad tool that will consider selected things, mostly at the level of policies that relate to teachers. And now, on the next slide, is what we have in mind for what I would call level 2 scorecards. Again, to try to assess whether the teacher policies and frameworks are well developed and take into account the latest evidence on what works to improve teaching and learning. So this is a first slide on which it would be great to get your feedback. These are the 7 potential dimensions that we are considering for now as part of that more detailed, so level 2, not aggregate level 1, level 2 is below, more detailed tool for assessing pre-service education in countries. So for now, we have identified 7 potential dimensions, or 7 objectives, if you want to take the terminology that I use for Saber. The first one is very broad. It is whether pre-service education is aligned with other national policies, right? And I'll explain a little bit what I mean by that. Then we have to look at the curriculum in teacher training institutions. Is that curriculum adequate, appropriate? Does it take into account the latest innovations? Does it take into account new emerging opportunities? Think about AI as one example, etc. After the curriculum, we have to see whether teacher training institutions have enough practicum. We all know that practice is essential, even in pre-service training, and whether this is designed to encourage very specific pedagogical skills that teachers need to acquire. Now, once we have defined what the curriculum is, once we have defined what are the pedagogical skills that teachers need and how to have enough practicum, practice, coaching, role-playing, all of those things, we need to have the right teacher educators. We need to select them properly, and we need to train the teacher educators themselves so that they can train the teachers. Next comes the issue of funding, the availability of facilities that could include availability of ICT and other resources so that there can also be some components of self-paced online learning, for example, and of course, the learning materials, what is provided to teachers or student teachers in the TTIs, but also what are the training guides for the teacher educators, for example. We then also need to make sure that the right students are attracted. And one specific issue in many African countries is diversity, including by gender. In some countries, you have way too few women who are teachers at the secondary level. And when we think about the role of TTIs, teacher training institutions, in leadership training, very few women achieve positions of leadership. That's not the case in all the countries, but in many low-income countries, that's how it is. And finally, there is the leadership of the TTI itself, and issues related to autonomy and accountability of those teacher training institutions. So these are the 7 potential dimensions that we have identified so far. There is no unique way of mapping what we would like to see in pre-service education in various categories. This is just one attempt, and it would be great to get your feedback as to whether this is the right way to categorize those dimensions, or maybe there is another way. But if you think about why this is presented this way, it starts with the very broad aspects, national policies, then what are we teaching, the curriculum, and how are we ensuring that the teachers get the skills they need to teach well, that's the practicum and the pedagogy. And then we need to train the teachers to teach that curriculum and pedagogical skills. And then, of course, we have the broader conditions of funding, facilities, and learning materials. We need to ensure diversity of students. And as an overarching objective, there should be some autonomy from the teacher training institutions to innovate, for example. But there also needs to be accountability and leadership, and issues, for example, like how are teacher training institutions certified, right? Accredited is a better word. That's the framework. Now, let me give you a few examples of, in the next slide, elements that we are thinking of integrating. This is not an exhaustive list, but it gives you a little bit more ideas, right? So if we think about the alignment of pre-service education with teacher policies and national education strategies, well, the first alignment has to be with the career stages. We encourage countries to have career stages and very specific competencies that teachers need to acquire to become teachers and then to move up the career ladder. If we take the African Union framework, there should be 4 stages in the career. So do the TTIs broadly follow these career stages, and do they provide, for example, the key competencies that teachers need in the first stage of the career? The type of degree needed, the curriculum, although that's also in the second point, but do, for example, the TTIs consider pre-primary to secondary education? That depends a little bit on the country. But for example, we are working in one country where there's a lot of demand to adapt, expand the curriculum for primary schools TTIs to pre-primary, which is something that probably many countries need to do. Now, if we look at the curriculum, there are issues of foundations of education, program design. Teachers typically need to learn about their topics that they will teach. Then there are cross-cutting themes, quite a few of them. There should be courses about leadership, digital skills, etc. These are some of the topics. Or if I take the Sub-Saharan analogy that I was mentioning before, the policy levers, right? The 7 broad categories would be the policy goals for pre-service education, and then those examples of topics under them could be policy levels. Practical and pedagogical skills, I mean, what do we do to make sure that the teachers can teach foundational learning? What does that require? How do we make sure that the teachers are able to take into account children with disabilities? GRP is gender responsive pedagogy that has to be part of the curriculum. How to make sure there is enough practice, how to target vulnerable learners, for example, the specific needs in post-conflict situation, etc., etc. The next one is a teacher educator policy goal. How do we train them? How do we select them? What should be their credentials? The next policy goal would be selection and support for teacher trainees. I mentioned the issue of diversity. How do we ensure that we have enough women, for example? But that's not only women, there are other dimensions. Should scholarships be provided? What's the cost? What happens to the induction period? There are other issues. Funding, infrastructure, learning materials. So that's obvious. This is what you need to function. And then autonomy, accountability, and leadership. I mean, how do we assess the leadership of teacher training institutions? What's the quality assurance mechanism? How do we accredit them and maintain their accreditation? Are there specific cultural issues and practices that need to be emphasized? So again, there is no real unique way to think about those issues, but this is just one first cut. And both in terms of the 7 categories or objectives and in terms of the subcategories, what we need to pay attention for. The idea is that we would ask questions that can then be answered by looking at what the country is doing. And then that would provide a diagnostic of pre-service education in countries. Now, the idea is to get a pilot of this fairly quickly, to test the pilot in a few countries, and to try to come up with a final version or an advanced version by January 2026. For a number of reasons, these are the deadlines. And we want to link this as well, as I mentioned at the very beginning, to the continental education strategy for Africa, so that when we have something that we feel is robust, others, including you, feel maybe robust, we have some practical guidance together with the African Union that we can provide so that member states can take inspiration if they want of those types of categories and diagnostic of how well they are doing. Next slide. I think I'm almost at the end. So the feedback that we would welcome from you. Are the 7 potential dimensions or objectives appropriate? Are diagnostic questions for each dimension appropriate? So we will try to share with you in a week or maybe a bit more, but we'll try to go fast, very draft diagnostic questions for each of those 7 dimensions, and then your feedback would be wonderful. We are going to try to propose a scoring mechanism for each question so that countries can be assessed that, well, that's not really done yet, or the country is very, very good at this, right? And of course, can members of the COP, apply the draft tool to your country? So as you know, there are homeworks for the COP. We hope that you get very engaged. We hope to benefit from your thinking, actually. And if you are interested, once we have this framework ready in pilot form to implement it in your country, we can see how that can be done. We would have to coordinate between you and us, but it would be wonderful to have your feedback. And of course, and that has been part of the discussion today, but also in the previous sessions and in the future sessions, if we have great examples, great examples of country innovations in those various areas, it would be wonderful to have it, because what we want to do is once we have the 7 or 8, whatever that is in the end, dimensions or objectives, and then the levers or the sub-questions related to that, once that is all kind of squared away and we think it's good enough, it's never going to be perfect. We want to explain the whole idea. Why did we choose that? And one of the best ways to explain is to mention country innovations. And so there will be a report, and we hope to be able with you also to identify some of those innovations. Let's see if I have one more slide. I think that was it, but let's check the next slide. That was it indeed. So I hope I was not too long. This was the first introductory presentation. We will share more on this with you. And if you already have some feedback today, that would be great. The hope is that this be useful, right? I mean, there's no point of writing a framework like that or diagnostic tool if nobody uses it. And your feedback will be very, very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation. And some questions are coming there. And we will now continue using the Google. Once Dr. Quintin gives us the kind of questions he wants responses, then we are going to put it in the Google Classroom so that we can collect the questions and the responses which you have here. So there are some questions here, Dr. Quintin, maybe you can answer one or two. One is, do you think qualification is possible and manageable to understand pre-service education?
Can you repeat the question? Do I think that qualification is possible?
Do you think qualifications is possible and manageable to understand pre-service teacher education?
Sorry, Dr. Mina, I think the question, I'm so sorry to interrupt. The question is, what is the value of having a scorecard? Do you think quantification is possible and manageable to understand pre-service teacher education?
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne, and thank you, Mina. I think it can be useful, right? I mean, we think that this scorecard is going to be a very, very first step to try to look at those issues. And if I may go back, so the idea is that we will have a broad scorecard, what I call level 1, and then we will have more detailed scorecards, which I call level 2. And actually, we will also have level 3, but level 3 is not something that we are going to design. Level 3 is going to be us pointing out very interesting innovations in those areas by countries, right? It's a way to think about issues. It's not a way to rank countries. That's not useful. It's a way to think in a systematic way about the issues. And so the core objectives is less to quantify performance than to see, okay, a country, for example, might do very well, say, in aspects related to foundational learning and practicum for better pedagogy in the classroom. So the TTIs, the teacher training institutions, are doing very well to really prepare the future teachers to do that, but say that they are doing nothing about gender responsive pedagogy, right? As an example. Well, then we can point that out, and then it's the country's decision to say, okay, maybe we should do something about GRP, right? But it could be about many, many different things. And so the idea is that we provide a grid to think about some of those issues and some of the reforms that teacher training institutions might need to undertake under the leadership of the ministry or the Teacher Service Commission or whomever it is in the country that does that, right? So it is really a thinking tool, and the quantification is just a way to try to help countries understand where they are, but it's not the core objectives. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you very much, Dr. Quintin. And another question is there in the chat. Maybe you can answer it. But we are coming to the end of the session, which has been very, very interactive, informative. I would like to share a link in the chat for feedback regarding this question. How was your learning experience? So you can click that link in the chat to share about the feedback on this session today. Since we started almost 2 hours ago, and now we are coming to the end. We had 4 presentations. And
so just let me say, Mina,
yes,
if I may just say, because I see the question in the chat, and that's actually an important session, an important question, right? And indeed, this is from somebody in Kenya, I think, and East Africa more broadly. There has been a lot of move towards competency-based curriculum or competency-based education, right? We certainly want to capture that in the diagnostics tool. Some countries are a bit more advanced, maybe Kenya, Uganda, there may be others. This is something that is likely to become more and more important over time. If there are ways that we can ask simple questions in a scorecard like the one we want to design to capture that, that would be great, right? And so if any of the participants, you have any suggestions, right, we will share with you through Marianne and Dr. Mena a bit more details about this, and we might come back to it at the next session. But don't hesitate to share ideas with Marianne and Dr. Mena on what you think should be some of the emphasis that we should put in the diagnostics tool, because all your feedback will be very useful. Back to you, Dr. Mena.
Thank you very much for that input, and we look forward for more engagement. We'll be continue sharing in the Google Classroom. Your assignments are now live. If you go to Google Classroom, they are live, and we continue collaborating. I'd like to invite Marianne to give the closing remarks.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Wow, it's hard to even think about what to say right now because it has been such a packed session, and I feel like my mind is flooded with information and ideas and comments and questions too. In fact, as I heard the presenters from Nigeria and from AKU speaking, I was asking as many questions as participants were in the chat box. So yes, I see lots of hands, giving them rounds of applause. Thank you so much to the wonderful presenters from today, the speakers. We do realize that there was a lot of information today. A lot of people shared. We would like to invite you to continue interacting with the information that you came in contact with today on Google Classroom. We'll share the slides with you immediately after the session, and the recording probably tomorrow, the recording, when it's uploaded to YouTube. Please have a look. I know it's a lot of information. We don't like to always have sessions this way where it's a lot of in one session. We'll do more slowly unpacking next time with you. And I want also like to say that we know that you're interested in your assignment as well. The assignment will be given time next time. We will show you some templates for how you can approach your assignment that will be due end of November. And you'll be in groups together to talk through how you'd like to do your assignment. That'll be the first time we really get a chance to explore the assignment together. So yes, today was quite rich, it was quite packed. Please let us know how you felt about today's session in the chat box. Again, I'm sharing the link to a short survey. Just take you 1-2 minutes to do. And please select session 4. That's today's session 4. So that's really all from me. Just a very warm thank you to the presenters and to all the participants. Please do tell us how today's session went and be in touch with us for the homework and for the slides and the recording. Thank you, Mina. Back over to you.
Thank you very much, everybody. And we look forward for the presentation, the work in the Google Classroom.
But it's African.
Goodbye.
Welcome. Let's go to school. No, we never retire. I'll never look my back. Pick up your shoes. Pull up your socks and go. Let's go to school. No, we never retire. I'll never look my back. Pick up your shoes. Pull up your socks and go. I wake up in the morning. I wash up my face. I lift up my eyes and pray to the Father to guide on my way. I look into my future, yes, I'm going to be. I can never be so sad, worried in my life. It's the key to the future, everywhere I go. Let's go to school, we never retire. I'll never look my back, pick up your shoes, pull up your socks and go. Let's go to school, we never retire. I'll never look my back, pick up your shoes, pull up your socks and go. I wanna be a doctor when I grow up. Teach all my friends and the people at home. Teach them to love My mother, my father, my country. Kanina masuri tene. What if this is hula? To go wasaba. Papa name in a left, never give up. Then it shows from pick up your pen and go. Let's go to school. So we never retire. I'll never look my back. Pick up your shoes, pull up your socks and go. Let's go to school. So we never retire. I'll never look my back. Pick up your shoes, pull up your socks and go. Rock up my town. Now you know where it's okay, let's get Gori mungu si. Gemani ke bukat bawa chiloto. Em kuma na yenye na mumaso. Jagala